So then I started thinking about what a belief system was. I realized that a belief system was actually a set of moral guidelines. And moral guidelines are guidelines about how you should behave, also how you should perceive. And the reason that a moral guideline is necessary for you to perceive is that you can't look at anything without a hierarchy of value, right? Think about it, like how many things in this room could you look at? There's innumerable things in this room to look at. There's just all these squares, the little tiny squares in this fabric. You could look at those things for till the end of time, one at a time, but you don't do that. In fact, if I took most of you out of this room, there's a very low probability that you'd be able to tell me what color the walls were, or even if those things were on the walls. And the reason for that is that who cares? As long as the walls don't move, color is irrelevant, and there's no reason for you to remember it. It has no emotional significance. It has no value. And so what you do instead is, well, this is what you're doing. So why are you here? I don't mean in the broad metaphysical sense. I mean specifically, why are you here right now? And I would say, well, you're students, obviously, and you're trying to get a degree, and you know, you believe that that will have some functional utility. Maybe you'll be a little wiser and a little more literate and be able to think a little better and be able to write a little better, and so you'll actually be more functional in the world. That would be good, you know, and maybe you're interested. But anyways, you're in this particular lecture so that you can take this particular class, so that you can get a particular kind of degree, so that you can launch your life. And then in your life you're probably going to meet someone that you have a long-term relationship with, and you're going to have children, and you're going to partake in this society, and that's why you're here. All of those reasons simultaneously is why you're here. And so then that helps you decide what to look at. And so what you look at is, at the moment, or listen to, is me, because in principle I'm the gateway to that set of accomplishments at this moment. And so you focus on me, and that's because you value that. And so what that means is you can't even look at the world without a value structure. You know, it's chaos if everything is equally unimportant, or if everything is equally important. It's chaos. And so a value system structures the very way that you perceive the world. And I don't mean that metaphysically. There's plenty of experiments that have demonstrated that, like the invisible gorilla experiment, which, how many of you know about the invisible gorilla experiment? How many don't? Well, roughly speaking, what happens is that there are two teams, a white team dressed in white and a team dressed in black. And there's a video of them, and the black team is passing a basketball back and forth, and the white team is passing a basketball back and forth, and you're supposed to count the times the basketball gets passed back and forth. There's only one basketball. And so, you know, you're diligent for whatever reason. You do what the experimenter asks you, and you count the basketball tosses, and you think, well, that's not so hard, it's like 16. So you tell them 16, and they say, did you see the gorilla? And half of you say, what are you talking about? And the experimenter says, well, let's watch again, but this time don't count. Well, sure enough, like 30 seconds into the video, and you know, the players fill the video screen. It's not like they're 300 yards in the distance, you know, like little ants playing basketball. They're right filling the screen. You can see their faces. Sure enough, a minute into the video, this guy in a gorilla suit, and he's not little, and neither is the gorilla suit, he comes out, bangs his chest right in the middle of the screen for 5 seconds, and then disappears. And more than half actually, of people don't see that. And it's even worse. Dan Simon did another experiment where you're at a counter, you know, at a store, and there's a clerk there, and you're talking to the clerk, and the clerk goes down hypothetically to get something, and a different clerk pops up, and you'd think, hey, I'd notice that, but you don't. And you can even vary the clerk quite a bit, and people don't notice. So we focus on very particular things, and the reason we don't notice is because it actually doesn't matter. In terms of our ongoing action at that point, the clerk is interchangeable. As long as the entity there acts like a clerk, that's sufficient. So, belief systems structure your perceptions. Value systems, we're going to call them value systems. They structure your perceptions, and they also guide your actions, because you act in accordance with your values, conscious or unconscious. You have values that you don't know about because you just don't know yourself very well. You can tell that you have values that you don't know very well, because sometimes you get attracted to people that you know perfectly well that's a mistake, or you're trying to tell yourself to study and you don't, and so you're not really in control of yourself to any great degree. Some, and the more integrated you are, the more control you have, but you're kind of a loose collection of arguing sub-personalities, and they're more or less directed towards a single goal, but it depends on how committed you are to that goal, how much you've thought it through, how much you buy into it, how many of the contradictions in your world representation you've managed to iron out, and all of that. So, but in any case, it's value systems that govern action and perception. And so we're going to take an existential perspective, a phenomenological and an existential perspective in this course. And phenomenological means that we're going to base our presuppositions on the idea that what you experience is real, all of it. We're not really dividing the world into object and subject. That isn't how this particular approach works. It's more like you have a field of experience. It includes things like pain, which is not really something objective, but it's real. I mean, one of the things I've come to understand is you are not required to believe what I'm telling you, by the way. If you have an argument about why some of this doesn't make sense, then follow that sucker, because I'm trying to tell you what I've reached with regards to bedrock presuppositions, and I haven't been able to put pry bars underneath them, but that doesn't mean you won't, and you should try. Anyways, moral system tells you how to act and what to see, and a shared moral system keeps your emotions under control and fulfills your motivational needs. Now, there's this old idea of David Hume's, and David Hume famously posited that you cannot derive an ought from an is. And what he meant by that was that merely knowing the objective facts about something does not tell you how to implement those facts in your life, and that's actually a gap. Now, you could say, and I think this is the case, that that's actually a necessary consequence of the scientific endeavor, because one of the things that you're trying to do as a scientist is to strip away the value of the object, right? Because I don't care what your idiosyncratic notion of the object is. I want to know how you perceive the object such that everyone else will perceive it at least that way. And so that takes the subjectivity completely out of it. And so it might just be a necessary consequence of the scientific method that it doesn't have a morality implicit in it. People argue about that. Sam Harris, for example, argues, he believes that we can come up with a scientific morality. I don't believe that, because I don't think that you can make rational judgments about value. It's too complicated. It's far too complicated. It's something that has to emerge. It can't be. I mean, Marxism was supposed to be a scientific utopia predicated on scientific principles and all of that, and it just didn't work. Anyways, so I kind of buy Hume's argument that you can't derive an ought from an is. Now, that's a problem. First of all, it's a problem because you have factual knowledge, but you don't know how to implement it. It's like, should you spend money on AIDS, or should you spend money on cancer, or should you spend money on higher education? How the hell are you going to calculate that rationally? You can't, because you just don't have the information at hand. It's not possible to, I worked for a UN committee at one point, and the UN committee had like 100 proposals for how the world could be improved, but there was no order to them. It's like, wasn't, you know, this was more important than this. It's like, well, that's the end of that. You know, you got to start with something, and so that means you have to make something more important than other things, obviously, in your life. If everything's of equal importance, then you're paralyzed.